Hello and welcome to the Jewish Press Forum. I am Eli Chomsky, editorial staffer at the Jewish Press, and today our special guest is prominent Brooklyn attorney and longtime community activist both here and abroad, which he'll tell us about, and that would be Shlomo Mostofsky. He is a candidate for civil court judge in the September 13th Democratic primary. Welcome, Mr. Mostofsky.
Thank you.
And thanks for stopping by. Nice
My
to have
pleasure.
you here. In your first attempt to win an elective office, why are you aspiring to be a civil court judge after a prominent career in law?
That's probably the question I've been asked the most in the last 2 months.
I thought I was creative, but I guess not. Okay.
I worked for approximately 12 years in the civil court system. 6 years in the family court, and then approximately 4 years in Supreme Court, and then about a year in civil court. My first judge retired. My second judge, unfortunately, passed away, and then I was able to catch on with somebody because you only get 30 days. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was 39 and decided that, 12 years and you lose 2 jobs by ways you didn't think you'd lose them. And it was time to go into private practice. And I started my practice, and since I had a reputation in family law, that's sort of where my practice went. And I've been doing it ever since. I've had an active practice, a very busy practice, but I was very lucky. Not all the judges treat their law secretaries and law assistants like the judges I had. They gave me a tremendous amount of authority and trusted me like as if I was them. And when I worked in family court, for example, there are emergency child abuse cases that the judge has to hear. Well, the judge has 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, depending on which part you're in, other cases on the calendar. My judge felt absolutely confident, and he would have me go and do his entire calendar, try to conference the cases, settle them, adjourn the cases, and he accepted what I did. When I moved to Supreme Court, not only did I work on all the decisions, I actually have a quote on my website from Justice Barry Horowitz, who I worked for, and the family court judge I worked for was Judge Leon Deitch. But Judge Horowitz wrote a letter on my behalf as a reference saying that in all the years I worked for him, he never changed a single word in any decision that I drafted for him. And since we were a submission part, which meant there was no oral argument or motions, I was basically the one that drafted every single written decision. And I enjoyed that. I think from the rest of my life, I think people that know me and those who might hear some questions, I really lived a life of public service, and I really enjoyed it very much.
Which we'll get to in a few minutes.
And I liked the part of writing. I liked the part of dealing with the public, and I aspired for many, many years to be a judge. And again, politics is politics, and Brooklyn politics is Brooklyn politics, and there are mayoral politics, and I sort of put everything on the back burner because it just was something that I didn't want to get involved in. And then the seat opened up here in the 5th Judicial District, and a lot of friends who knew that I aspired to become a judge turned around to me and said, listen, you're at the right age, the right maturity, you have tremendous experience after everything you've done at Young Israel and your other experiences, and the different communal organizations you led, and why don't you take a look at this? I mean, you've been telling people you wanted to be a judge, you're at the right age, yeah, this is your shot, when are you going to wait to do this? And we discussed this with my family, with our Rabbanim, and we all came to the conclusion that this was something that I should do, and that I would always feel sorry if I didn't take a chance and go for this.
I hear what you're saying. Major change in lifestyle, do you think, once you are hopefully successful in your case?
Yeah, the major change in lifestyle is I'd actually be home. I put in very long hours. I have besides my practice, I do a lot of consulting for Judicial District and for Rabbanim all over New York, sometimes outside New York, occasionally Eretz Yisrael. I get phone calls from Rabbanim, from people that the Rabbanim send to me, Occasionally people tell me that Rabbi so-and-so told them to call me, and I go, oh, okay. I'm not really sure who Rabbi so-and-so is, but I assume that he got my name from someone else. And I spend a lot of time helping people on the telephone, and this takes up a lot of time and energy, and I work very hard on my cases. Some of my clients will tell you the hours that I've put in, the late nights we spent together trying to help them. And so the change in circumstances would be that I'd actually see my house except for Shabbos. But I'm not really doing it for that reason. I'm doing it because, it comes a point in your life that you really want to do something that you had a goal to do. And this was a goal of mine for a very long time.
Right. What are the main issues in a judgeship race, and how do your positions differentiate, to whatever degree, from that of your opponent, Charles Finkelstein?
I know Charles for a very long time. He's worked in the DA's office. He's had other positions. I think what I bring to the table is experience that not many of the people in Brooklyn have had when they've run for a judgeship. I led the National Council of Young Israel for 11 years. It gives me a nationwide and perhaps an international-wide experience. Even legally, we've filed amicus briefs on at least half a dozen or more different issues of importance to the Jewish community before the Supreme Court and appellate courts around the United States. I had to read these briefs. I wasn't going to let the organization just sign on to briefs until I was positive. There were other issues that involved the Jewish community here in New York. And I had to make a lot of decisions on whether or not there were issues that I wanted the organization to get involved in, for legal issues, social issues, moral issues. And besides that, I've traveled all over in Eretz Yisrael, meeting with different politicians, different rabbanim, traveled in different places in the world, met with some of the Gedolim, and brought some of the issues that I have in my practice to them. And I've had a very wide experience dealing with this. Even here in the community, I've dealt with a lot of the Hasidic Rebbes here in the community, and if not directly, indirectly. And I've had a few phone calls overseas from certain Hasidic Rebbes asking me to help with cases. So I come with a very broad experience besides my local experience just as an attorney here in New York. I believe that I come with experience that's sort of outside the regular box that the New York and the Brooklyn attorneys are in. I've seen different cultures. I've seen the way people live. I don't know how many people that could have said that they were in Jordan or Jenin and Morocco and some of these places, but it's not the fact that I just traveled there, but you saw the way different people live, and you learned a little bit about their societies, and then you come back to Brooklyn, and you see the same type of people and people that come from these backgrounds, and you begin to understand how that fits into their social system and to their view of the legal system. You realize that we're not very much different from all of these people, that we look at the court system in an insular community. And I feel that this helps, besides my legal ability, where I've lectured to the district attorney's office on... I got a phone call one day. The district attorneys don't understand why Orthodox women would drop orders of protection in order to get a get. Somebody called me up when I set up a forum to explain this to them. And we did. And we had some Rabbanim come and explain it, because they couldn't understand that concept. They picked up the phone and called me up. Then there was another time where they wanted to do it for social workers as well, because they had to understand what the issues were in a Jewish divorce as opposed to a secular divorce. I've written other legal articles. I've written articles about children at risk in the Jewish press and other places. I actually think I'm the first person that wrote an article about drinking before Purim.
Which is good advice.
But I just have a very, very broad background in doing so many different things. And I think I bring that to the table, that if I'm elected, I come to court with that experience, the legal experience, the ability to write decisions, the ability to run a courtroom, and an understanding of the communities that I'm going to be serving and the Jewish community as well.
Talking about the issue of getting a get, of a note and so on, I know you're actively involved with a bill that is soon to be introduced by Chaver Knesset, member of Knesset Nissim Zev of the Shas Party, after the Yom Tovim in October. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, last year I was in Eretz Yisrael for the Conference of President meetings in February, and I received a telephone call from a member of Minister Nissim's office, and they said, "We want to talk to you." Well, the first thing they asked was, "Is it true that we want to know how we can extradite somebody to Israel for not giving a get?" So I said that would be very hard to do because it's not against the law in America not to get a get. It's not a criminal act. Well, is there any ideas that you have? I said, well, let's come together and meet and see what we can do. So they said, come to the Knesset and we'll meet, which was a pretty interesting thing to do, to come and meet with a member of the Knesset about a statute. And we were having this conversation, and the problem they had was when the Beis Din in Israel, which has authority over issues of marriage and divorce, actually orders somebody that they must give a get, and they flee Israel in order to avoid giving the get. What does Israel do? They're in the United States. How do they stop it? So I gave it some thought, and I looked at them and I said, do you have the ability to cancel the person's passport? And they looked at me and they said, what are you talking about? I said, well, if you cancel the person's Israeli passport and they're in the United States, and you tell the embassy in the United States not to issue a new one, and you call Homeland Security that there's an Israeli in the United States that has no papers, likelihood is that Homeland Security will send that person back to Israel. And they looked at me again, and somebody from the Interior Ministry, from a department that deals with passports, passed by in the lunchroom where we were sitting. They called him over and they asked him, do you think this could work? And he said, yeah, I think so. We have to talk about it. So I know they discussed it at the last session in the Knesset, and it was going to different committees. And I received a letter because I told them, listen, if this bill passes, I'm coming to Israel when it gets signed. I said, because I never thought I'd come up with an idea to get a bill in the Knesset passed. And they told me that in October it's going to be brought up again before the Knesset. And
does it look good for passage?
That's what they tell me.
Well,
listen.
that's the thing. It's a lobbying thing, and it goes back and forth.
Right, it goes back and forth. But I understand that this went to. Again, I don't know how the committees work in the Knesset, but it was looked over by one of the committees that dealt with halacha. And I heard it was moving along, but then the Knesset adjourned for the summer. But they actually introduced this bill, which was pretty amazing, because I was waiting to hear, they didn't introduce it, it wasn't going to happen, but they did.
This might very well, by the way, have a wide spectrum of support, because it's not just a halachic issue. A lot of more liberal, pro-women's groups will be in favor of a bill like this too, because it will help women not to become an agunah.
Yes, and in Israel the courts...
So it could be a really bipartisan issue.
Yes, because some of the civil courts in Israel have actually issued decisions where they've given damages to women where the husband has been ordered to give a get in Beis Din, because they said that once the Beis Din orders, since it's considered a governmental agency, and orders a husband to give a get, that's a governmental right that was given to the woman to receive the get, and therefore she's allowed to collect damages. And it was very interesting. I don't know the background of the judge who wrote the decision in that case. She was very clear to say, I don't know what my decision is going to have an effect on your ability to receive a get, but you came here, and this is the decision I'm following. So again, it's an interesting idea. They didn't shoot it down, which I was pretty amazed at, and they're going ahead with it, so I'm very proud of it.
Right.
It's very exciting to me.
Could you apply any of that to everything you just described to being a civil court judge on the get issue or the process itself?
Well,
I mean, we have get laws here
Right.
in New York. Shelley Silver and others have been actively involved in that for many years.
There are other implications to a law like this. There are cases where a Beis Din in the United States has ordered somebody to give a get, and they've gone to Israel. And because of the psak and there are different halachic decisions on how seriously the person must give a get, different levels of what the psak says, they will keep somebody in jail in Israel, an American. And at one time the State Department issued a warning to men going to Israel, and they would put them in jail. But there are a lot of international cases that come back and forth between Israel and the United States on child support issues, on custodial issues, that might not necessarily come in front of me as a civil court judge, but civil court judges don't necessarily only sit in civil court. They go to family court, they go to Supreme Court, and there are different places. And if somebody has a judgment on a child support order, they can come to civil court and possibly try to enforce that order. Israel is a signatory of the reciprocal child support treaty with the United States. So you can actually take a judgment from Israel and register it here in the United States and collect child support. So there are many issues. I was involved in a case involving Hong Kong, Israel, and the United States over which had jurisdiction over a case. One of the first international cases, I was working for the judge, and a person claimed that Israel did not have jurisdiction because they were only there as part-time and they didn't stay and they didn't make aliyah. And when I did the research, it looked like the guy was right. And I took a look at the transcript from the Beis Din in Israel, and he actually was not only a participant, but he had a to'ain representing him at the Beis Din. And I discussed the issue with the judge, and I said, well, he appeared in court, he accepted the jurisdiction, and even though, had he not accepted the jurisdiction, we would have had to issue the decision one way. I said, but here he accepted the jurisdiction, and we upheld the child support order. So these things come before the court here, and I've done this before. I've had child custody cases using the Hague Convention, and these are things that are familiar to me. I've dealt a lot with what they did. So you have arbitrations that those would come in front of civil court on a contract and things like that, of that sort, Neighbors make a contract, two businessmen make a contract. And a lot of times there can be an arbitration or a Beis Din clause involving millions of dollars. And those have to be enforced, and sometimes people bring that to court. They'll bring the psak to court. So these are things that I deal with very often. I work very well with a lot of what they did. I've occasionally been a to'ain to a certain extent in what they did. I've worked with to'anim, so I understand how they work, and this also would help with the process. But again, I make the point that a lot of people ask me questions about the Jewish part of my representation, but I wouldn't be representing the Jewish community. I'd be representing the people of Brooklyn when I was on the court. But this gives me a different perspective as far as the Jewish community is concerned than my opponent, who's also Jewish.
Right, I hear what you're saying. What aspect of your 11 years, the position that you had at the National Council of Young Israel, prominent position, accomplished a lot over 11-year period, what aspect or two of that position helps you, or do you think will help you, if you're successful in this campaign and become a judge of the circuit court?
Well, I think perhaps the one that is going to have the biggest effect on me is the relationship I've had dealing with the issue of Jonathan Pollard. I saw justice run amok. I saw injustice. When you have somebody in jail for a period of time, that people who spied for the Soviet Union and were responsible for the deaths of Americans spying for the United States in the Soviet Union, and they're already out of jail. And Jonathan Pollard, who spied for the United States, is in jail. And you have people like Henry Kissinger and James Woolsey, and even the assistant to Caspar Weinberger, who has now said that Caspar Weinberger asked for the life sentence because he was anti-Semitic, and you have people like Dennis Ross who are now coming out for it. and you read the decisions, and you see how justice can be applied procedurally to give somebody such a disproportionate sentence, I think that's something that you have to keep in mind if you've seen something like that. The Rubashkin case, where a federal judge is involved so long in a prosecution of a case, an investigation of a case, and if you think about it, I don't think you could get two U.S. Attorney Generals from different parties to agree on almost any issue. But if you consider the fact that every living United States Attorney General felt that the sentence was too long, and the federal judge just ignored it, and then it went up on appeals, and the appellate court ignored it. These are things that
gave him a longer prison sentence than was recommended.
Right. These are things that again,
sending a message is one thing, but really.
Right. And I'm not going to be sitting in federal court, and I'm not going to have these issues, but you do realize how a decision that you make can affect somebody's life.
So it gives you a greater appreciation for the principle of true justice.
For true justice, definitely. I had an interview at a committee, and it was, you don't pick when things happen. I'm in shul that morning and a little bit half asleep, and they're up to get Kriyas Torah, and the Laning Pasha shoftim, and all of a sudden they read Tzedek Tzedek, and my ears jump up.
Yeah.
And when I went for the interview that day, the person asked me, what do you do when you have a pro se litigant in front of you, that's somebody without an attorney? And I said, well, I'll tell you, they just read this morning in the synagogue the portion that says, justice shall you pursue. I said, and under Jewish law, we have the theory that you don't favor a rich person, you don't favor a poor person. You have to treat people as equals. I said, and there are certain limits in the law. You're not allowed to be somebody's representative. You're not allowed to be the person's attorney if they don't have one. But you also have to treat people fairly, with dignity. You have to apply the law fairly. You can't favor an attorney. You can't make someone feel uncomfortable because there's an attorney. And that's something also that you bring to the table as a Jewish person, because you've been brought up with these ideas of justice. And again, it doesn't. I try to be very careful when I say some of these things, because it's very Jewish sounding, and we're not the majority of people in Brooklyn, let alone in New York. But I think that my background isn't just with the Jewish community. I was an attorney that represented probably thousands of non-Jews in child abuse cases, child neglect cases, custody cases, child support cases when I was on the assigned counsel panel for 12 years in the family court. So my experience isn't just within the community. You saw how justice was meted out to people who were poor, people who came from other countries, people who I needed an interpreter to help me speak with. So I have a very broad background and an understanding of what it's like for these people to come to court. And I've seen it firsthand, and it's really had an impact on me. Besides the fact that the two judges I worked for were very, very fairness and justice was very important to them. Barry Horowitz was very well liked. As a matter of fact, at the train station yesterday, an attorney, I didn't know he was an attorney, a guy walks down the steps and goes, "Who'd you used to work for in the courts?" I go, "Barry Horowitz." He says, "Great guy." And then the guy jumps down the train station. And people really liked him. And I once asked him, he was friends with everybody. I said, "How come you never shake anybody's hand when they stick it out in the courthouse?" He says, "Because I don't know if the lady walking down the hallway is the person coming in front of me for the trial. And if she doesn't see me shake her attorney's hand, she's never going to believe that I'm going to be fair. So outside the courthouse, I'm everybody's friend. Inside the courthouse, I don't shake anybody's hand."
Right.
And this is where I worked for a large portion of my career. And I absorbed a lot of that. So this is what I hope to do if I become a judge. I hope to take the lessons that I learned, the research, the writing, the personal lessons, and apply this in my work. And this is really what I want to do.
Along those lines,
Go ahead.
and you'll appreciate this, I hope. Closing argument. Why should the people of Brooklyn elect Shlomo Mostofsky?
Why should the people of Brooklyn select Shlomo Mostofsky?
It's pretty broad, it's pretty vague, but go.
Okay. I have to take a drink before that one, but it's only water.
I know, Jim. Make the case.
There are a lot of people that know me in Brooklyn, not only in the Jewish community, but outside the community and the legal community. And I think one of the things that I have is a very good reputation. People come to me and are referred to me because of that reputation. People know me because what I've done pro se for litigants, for people that come to my office, no matter who they are. I believe I have a reputation in the courts for fairness, for dealing with people, for honesty and integrity when I bring cases in front of the courts. The judges may not always agree with me, may not like what I say, but I think they understand that when I give my word and I put something in front of them, I don't say something that isn't a fact. I think I'm well respected by the bar here in New York. I received an approved rating by the Combined City Bar, Brooklyn Bar Association Committee. And I think I have a fairly good, the Daily News and the New York Law Journal both decided to profile me about a year ago. And I have no idea who sent them to me. But they did. And I was really surprised because I wasn't on the crime page in the Daily News. This was a profile of me as a lawyer.
The police blotter.
Right. I remember when I was a kid, used to read that on Sunday, and this was an amazing thing. And obviously, somebody recommended to both of these publications that they come and interview me for what I do and how I work and how I work in the community as well as in the legal field. And I think, again, I bring that to the community. I bring that to the borough. I've been supported by a large number of politicians who, many of them have told me they never get involved in a judicial race. Besides David Greenfield here in Borough Park, but Councilman Dominic Recchia, Councilwoman Sarah Gonzalez, Assemblyman William Colton, who told me that he rarely endorses anybody. Assemblywoman Rhoda Jacobs, and I hope I didn't leave anybody out from that list. But I was very honored that these people actually took the time out to meet with me and then to endorse me. So I have a very broad appeal in the city that these people have actually gone out of their way. And I think I would make a very good judge. And I would work very hard for the people of the city. And again, people have stopped me and asked me, what are you going to do? I'm going to be a judge. There's not much I can do. And my answer is, be fair. And I think that that's an ability that I have, and that's really why I asked the people to come out and vote for me. You want to elect a fair, competent judge, and I think that's what I would be.
Shlomo Mostofsky, candidate in the Democratic primary on Thursday, September 13th for Civil Court Judge in Brooklyn, and we wish you well.
Thank you.
And I urge everyone, as we all do here at the Jewish Press, to please exercise your right to vote. It is an honor, and it's an obligation, and it really is an obligation. Never take democracy for granted. Please exercise that right. And once again, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and all the best.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I hope the topics